2016 Candidates Forum. Will you all please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you all for coming today. My name is Jim DiDonato, and I am the director of the Round Lake Area Library. We are bringing this event to you today in partnership with the League of Women Voters and WRLR 98.3 FM. This afternoon's Candidate Forum is designed to provide you information from primary sources on your way to becoming informed citizens and an informed electorate, which is part of our mission to provide current information, formal education support, independent learning, opportunities and life enrichment materials to a highly diverse public, and to nurture a lifelong repeat. Designed to provide you. I'd like to extend some thank yous to the Round Lake Beach Cultural and Civic Center. They have offered this space to us free of charge today. The Cultural and Civic Center offers a variety of events for social gatherings, for community events, and other activities. Please feel free to get in touch with them. They've done a fantastic job of helping us out today. So thank you to the Village of Round Lake Beach for this venue. I'd also like to extend a thank you to the League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters has partnered with the library for a number of years to bring a variety of candidates forum to our community. And today we have Diane Sanderson with us, who is handling all the coordination for today's events. We also have Corey Miller, who will be moderating for us in just a moment. Thank you to WRLR 98.3. They are broadcasting this live today and will rebroadcast this later. Comcast Local Channel 17 will be rebroadcasting this event as well. Both RLR, WRLR, and Comcast will rebroadcast in audio and in video format, respectively, next Sunday, February 28th at 2 o'clock, 98.3 FM, as well as Comcast Channel 17. I'd like to thank our candidates. I know that all of you put a lot of time, money, energy, effort, and you bring your families and friends into this, and it is a lot of work. So thank you all for your attempt to bring our community to a better place and for dedicating your time and service in our area. Thank you very much. My final thank you is to you. This is a Sunday afternoon where we can all be home enjoying nap time or sporting events or spending time with our families and friends. I thank you all for showing an interest in our community and coming out to take time to listen to our candidates. Thank you. A couple of final notes before I hand this over to Lori. This event is not a debate. This event is designed to provide residents the opportunity to get a first-person response from our candidates. This event is for everyone, and it's expected that everyone will be respectful of others and avoid argumentative tones in the discussion. This is a nonpartisan activity presented by nonpartisan organizations. None of the organizations hosting this event support any candidate or ballot issue. The opinions of any candidates do not reflect the views of any organizations today. Candidates showing up today on stage are in contested races only for the March primary. To reiterate, rebroadcast will happen on February 28th, 2 o'clock by Comcast and WRLR. Comcast will further rebroadcast on every Sunday after that, following the initial rebroadcast this coming Sunday. All right, now it's time to get to the excitement of our event. We're going to have Lori Miller from the League of Women Voters moderating today. Lori comes to us with a bachelor's degree from San Diego State University and a master's in information systems from North Central College. She is a financial planner from Wheaton and has come all the way from Wheaton today. Thank you very much to help moderate today's event. Thank you, Lori.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here today. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Tim had mentioned there's a lot of opportunity today to stay home and just take a relaxing afternoon, but we applaud you for taking time out of your busy schedules. You have choices, and you have choices on quality candidates too in contested races, and we want to make sure your voice is heard. The League of Women Voters, as Tim had mentioned, we're the largest nonpartisan organization working to progress public policy. And that's important. We want to keep it fair and transparent. And the League of Women Voters, we do like men, so we just keep the historical perspective with our name, because we started back in 1920. And organizing women, getting them to right to vote is really important. So I want to make sure that you get out, get your voice heard, work with us at the grassroots level, and ask your questions. I've already been handed some cards with questions to ask for candidates today. But it's really important that you find one of the League volunteers to get your thoughts heard. That's why you're here today. And this is the best example of grassroots of work, working with the League of Women Voters for transparency and fairness for these candidates. So I'd like them to come up to the stage, and I'm going to give them up to 1 minute to introduce themselves. And before I do that, I just want to suggest that there's going to be some ground rules on how we're going to participate. Yes, you are coming up. Nancy Rotering is coming here, and I believe she is running along with Brad Schneider for the Democratic nomination for the 10th District to represent us in the U.S. House of Representatives. So thank you, candidates, in advance for your willingness to serve in this capacity. We do appreciate that. Some of the ground rules we're going to be operating with today, the questions will be asked in writing. That does give our League members an opportunity to screen the questions, because we do not allow personal attacks or attacks that aren't really relevant to the office they're asking to serve for. So we want to make sure those are screened, and also to make sure that we have a fair representation of the actual questions and issues that are on your mind. So we have the right to reserve for redundancy and time purposes to make sure we don't ask a lot of duplicate questions, and to cover a variety of subject areas. They will have up to 1.5 minutes for their opening remarks, and Nancy did win the draw, so she will make her comments first, and then Brad will have his opening remarks up to 1.5 minutes. Then they'll reverse that for their closing comments. And depending on how much time is left over, we will ask all your questions. That is important, like I said, so it's not too late to get those pencils out and start writing those down. And then they have a mic at the table, so if you feel comfortable coming to the podium, you're invited to do that as well. But at this time, I'd like to go ahead and get started if there's no further questions. And I would like to ask in advance, and thank you for your cooperation, for not personally videotaping this and using it out of context. Again, the League promotes fairness and transparency, and we do have our capable partners, both in radio and with Comcast here, to have this for public viewing and public vetting in a more controlled structure. So thank you so much for participating in that. With that, Nancy?
Okay, we know this one's working. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Jim. Thank you to the League of Women Voters. As a proud member of the League, I recognize the vital importance of these opportunities for voters to be educated about the candidates that they're considering. As Lori mentioned, and also I want to thank the Round Lake High School National Honor Society for being here. Thanks so much for your help today. My name is Nancy Rotering. I grew up in the district. I went to public school. I went to Stanford, where I majored in economics, and then got my MBA at Northwestern, my law degree at the University of Chicago. I practiced healthcare law with McDermott, Will, and Emery for a number of years, and became a member of the Highland Park City Council in 2009 and ran for mayor in 2011. As mayor, I've balanced every budget. I've maintained a AAA bond rating, but I've also stepped out on behalf of my residents when they've needed me in situations that aren't typical in municipalities. We all suffered through the power outages of 2011, and we called ComEd, had hearings, demanded accountability, and ended up getting tens of millions of dollars invested in our infrastructure and improved communications to reduce our power outages and the impacts of those power outages. When the NRA packed my city council chambers, we stood up against them and we banned assault weapons with an ordinance that was taken all the way to the United States Supreme Court and then handed that out to other cities within the country looking for a model ordinance. The 10th District is looking for leadership. We have a lot of opportunities, and it's time for somebody who knows how to get things done to win this seat and hold this seat in 2018. Thank you.
Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to invite Brad Schneider to come and make his opening comments.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Brad Schneider, and I'm running to get back to the U.S. Congress to represent the 10th District, and I'm asking for your vote on March 15th. I was reminded actually today as we did the national anthem of the last time I was here with this configuration with the room cut in half was the citizenship ceremony we had organized to welcome 53 new U.S. citizens for the first time to say the national anthem or the Pledge of Allegiance as a U.S. citizen. That's just one of the reasons I want to get back to Congress, to fight to make sure that we have representation for all the people living in our communities. My number one focus when I was in Congress, now as I'm running and when I get back to Congress, is making sure, however, that we have an economy that's working for everybody. An economy that raises the tide for all boats, not just those of the fortunate few. That gets us back to a middle class that's expanding. That's why when I was in Congress, I voted to raise the minimum wage. Why I introduced legislation that would teach our workforce the skills manufacturers are looking. There are 600,000 jobs in this country going unfilled because we don't have people with the right skills. Introduced legislation that would help companies in our district hire people and provide them on-the-job training so we could get people in the right places. I'm running for Congress to continue the work we started. I look forward for your support, and I look forward to a conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we have technical assistance. To multitask, thank you. I'm sure you noticed our timers sitting in the front row. They have stop signs, and it's just like a traffic light. Yo means yellow. You've got a few more seconds to wrap up that thought. And then the stop sign means do complete that thought. And you'll get a nudge from me, and I'm sure the audience will give you a nudge too if you go past that time. And just like a budget item, time is a scarce resource. You have up to 1 minute to answer each question. And some of those questions, because I know they're going to get very challenging, you can put those into your closing comments. And of course, the candidates will make themselves available during the break period today to answer your questions, and I'm sure they encourage your dialogue after this. But we're going to go ahead and start our community conversation today with our first question. If I don't put my glasses on, I won't see that first question. And so here we go. We're going to start with candidate Schneider, and then we'll rotate the order. What is your stand on the extension of the deadline for the state's ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment?
Can you hear me if I talk without a microphone? No. Don't time it. While we're waiting in high school debate, we always had an opener and extemporaneous speech begin the conversation. We talked about Flight 1979, which when we were in high school. For your convenience and comfort, everything is automated. Nothing can go wrong. Can't go wrong. Can't go wrong.
I thought that was Murphy's Law.
Just 1, 2, 3.
Thank you. I do believe we can extend and work to pass the ERA. When I mentioned 1979, when I was in high school and college, when Nancy and I were in high school and college, we were in the same year, it was the push to try to move forward on the ERA. I remember going down to downtown Chicago with my classmates at Northwestern, walking, working, marching to try to make sure that we could get into our Constitution recognition that everybody's equal. This is a precept that I was raised from a very young age. My grandmother, who immigrated from pre-Soviet Russia, fleeing the pogroms, came to this country. She's the wisest person I know. She taught us a few lessons. One piece of wisdom was you have 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in proportion. But probably the most valuable lesson she taught all of her 18 grandchildren, and we hopefully have passed on to her 30-plus great-grandchildren, is that you treat all people the same. That this country recognizes you for who you are, as you are. And that's why we need equal rights.
Thank you. As obviously a woman, I've had my share of experiences in this country of where an ERA being passed would have had a tremendous impact. And we know, just even now, the conversation as we look at this presidential race, We know that Hillary Clinton said in Beijing, women's rights are human rights and human rights are women's rights. It's not a matter of half of the population not being treated fairly. It's a matter of all of us needing to be treated equally and making sure that issues such as wage, taking care of affordable child care, making sure that health care accessibility is available to all people regardless of gender, that there aren't biases built into the system, that we need to move forward in terms of equaling the playing field because there are so many opportunities lost when we don't have equality in our system. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate. I'm waiting on fresh batteries. The next question, we'll start with you, candidate Rotering. Citizens United, what is your view? If you agree with it, then why? If you don't agree with it, then what are you willing to do about it?
I'm going to make one correction. My last name is Rotering, like motoring, so just wanted to help you out with that. Thanks. It doesn't count. In terms of Citizens United, it's the scourge, one of the scourges of our political system. It never should have been allowed to carry in the Supreme Court. It has now set up an absolutely impossible situation for anybody who's interested in running for office. We know that we can't have representative government if we have dark money, if we have a handful of people providing the resources necessary for people to run for office. I co-taught a class at the University of Chicago on women in politics, and one of the questions was, what advice would you have for a single mother who wanted to run for office? And the answer was, it's going to be very difficult because the way the system currently is set up, it's very difficult for anybody to run along these lines when you're facing this kind of corporate money and these special interests standing up and providing resources for people in the system. So I would oppose it. I think the answer, if we can't get through the Supreme Court, would be a constitutional amendment. It's that important, it's that critical to make sure that the people running to represent you can have the resources to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nancy and I obviously agree on this. I think Citizens United historians will look back on that as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions ever made in this country. It is distorting our entire political process and is having a seriously negative effect on governance in this country. Just to give you an example, this summer, we've winnowed down the number of candidates, but this summer when there were 17 Republican presidential candidates, each with their own billionaire backing them, there were more Republican candidates with billionaires backing them than there were candidates. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Than there were candidates running for Congress in competitive races in the entire country. And both those factors are functions of Citizens United. The fact that individuals can support a candidate with unlimited funds. Billionaires can actually put a person in office, and at the same time, in our local races, you can't raise the funds to compete. We need to overturn Citizens United. I'm proud to be endorsed by Citizens United as well. Thank you.
Thank you. This is why I'm standing. The next question, we're switching topics. What should the federal government do to reduce gun violence? And candidate Schneider, we'll start with you.
Thank you. This is a personal issue. Many of you know that I'm named after my mother's uncle, my great uncle, who was killed by an assailant with a gun before I was born. When I got to Congress in 2013, the first speech I gave from the floor of the House, in spite of, or despite all of the warnings of my colleagues and friends saying you don't take on the most powerful lobby in Washington on your first speech as a freshman member, I spoke about what we can do to reduce gun violence in this country. We need to enforce and create universal background checks, closing the gun show loophole, the online loophole. We need to make trafficking of guns across state lines a federal crime. We need to make sure that people can't have access to assault weapons and large capacity magazines so they can walk into a movie theater and fire 70 bullets in less than a minute. But it's got to be more comprehensive than that as well. 90 people will die today from gunshots. 90 tomorrow and 90 the next day. 2/3 of those will take their own lives. There's an aspect of this crisis in our country that is also a mental health aspect, and we have to address that as well.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we've had yet another mass shooting today, and this is more apt than ever. It's becoming too regular a piece of news, and it's something that needs to end. We need Congress to turn around and change this conversation and stop being beholden to the NRA. There's plenty that the government can do. We can pass universal background checks. We can close down and enforce the handful of dealers who don't seem to be feeling like they need to follow the law, resulting in an unbelievable large volume of illegal guns coming to our streets from just a few dealers, a few states. We do need to talk about improving access to mental health care because we know that so many people are using guns who really would benefit from treatment and would perhaps not take their lives or the lives of others if they had had access to health care. I took action. We banned all assault weapons in Highland Park. It was a challenge to deal with the NRA calling us Nazis in the middle of our own council chambers, but we knew it was the right thing to do. And it's time for the U.S. government to step forward and say no more to assault weapons in large capacity magazines.
Thank you, candidates. I appreciate your thoughtful answers. The next question is, again, changing topics. What are your plans to ensure that the less affluent citizens of your district have the food, shelter, and medical care that they need? Candidate Nancy?
It's critical to have an advocate when you don't have a voice. It's critical to have a champion who will stand up and say, we need to take care of our neighbors, we need to take care of our communities. We've watched as the Republican Party has nibbled away through its various budgets and so forth at the very critical safety nets that are there to take care of our hungry, the people who don't have housing, the people who don't have access to safe neighborhoods. This is something that I've championed as a mayor. We've shined a spotlight on hunger in Highland Park and in the region. We've provided affordable housing, and I am a committed advocate on behalf of all of those pieces. We need to make sure that those safety nets are not taken apart, are not destroyed. There's talk about balancing the budget. You can't balance the budget on the backs of the vulnerable. That's absolutely the wrong place to be balancing the budget of this government. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Brad?
Thank you. So the Republicans continue to pass what we all affectionately call the Ryan budget. It's a budget that cuts funding, cuts $120 billion from the SNAP program, the food stamp program, at a time where food insecurity continues to be at the high it went to in the 2008 crisis. I was proud to be in Congress fighting against those Republican efforts, fighting to make sure we protect the tax credits that allow for affordable housing to be continued to developed and built around our nation. And I continue to fight against the Republican efforts, and they continue since I've left, to repeal, defund, or dismantle the Affordable Care Act. We have to keep all of those things in place. And that's the difference between the candidates on the stage now and the person currently in office, and why we have to make that change is so important. But we also have to work to strengthen our communities, to build our economy, to bring manufacturing jobs back, quality, well-paying jobs so people can afford to put a roof over their head, provide food, shelter, healthcare, and education to their children, and can be guaranteed the opportunity for a secure and dignified retirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead and keep the mic. The mic's working now. Yay. Thank you. And this is not a trick question. And candidate Schneider, you'll go first. What do you think Congress has done right lately?
It's a tough question. I'm going to flip it. I won't come to answer that. But right now you see in its rawest, most naked form the problem in Congress with the appointment of a new Supreme Court justice upon the death of Antonin Scalia. We elect our presidents for 4 years, not for 3. And the news of the Supreme Court justice's death was probably less than an hour old before Mitch McConnell came out and said, we are not going to allow the president to nominate and appoint a Supreme Court justice. That's just plain wrong. It is his prerogative and his duty, and he should appoint a justice, and the Senate should have a hearing. Having said that, we have seen over the last couple of years steps where, oftentimes forced by a crisis, the parties have come together. I will tell you, having been there, it's been under the leadership of Nancy Pelosi. John Boehner often had to turn to the Democrats to get it done. But in 2013, we did pass a budget for the first time in 4 years. And last year, they passed a budget again. But it's been under the leadership of the Democrats, not the controlling Republicans.
Thank you, and I echo, it's critical that the president be able to appoint a Supreme Court justice, having watched this from a close distance. Gene Scalia was a law school classmate of mine. What Congress has done right lately, frankly, there's been one piece of legislation that I was delighted to see, and that was the FAST Act. That was finally putting some sort of money into investing in our infrastructure. This is something that I've done as a mayor. We know that it impacts public safety and public health. And most particularly in this district, transportation and transit, the ability to get around is vitally important. It's been one of the major issues that we've talked about while we've been walking through the campaign trail, and I applaud the fact that they moved ahead with the FAST Act. That being said, I feel that they need to find a better way of continuing to support it. It's necessary to have the funding not just for 5 years in a sort of Band-Aid approach that Congress has passed, but it's critical and vitally important to invest in our infrastructure and to make sure that that's something that cities and states as well as the federal government can plan on for the next 20 years and on.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Nancy, do you support the expansion of Route 53 north to Route 120 in the southwest corner of the county?
So this is one of those questions where you look at public policy and you say there needs to be a balance. I just talked about the needs, the transportation needs, the challenges that face this portion of the district, and fully recognize that that could have a tremendous impact on a number of people. But that being said, I've also been an environmental advocate for a number of years, and I'm concerned about the impact that the expansion of 53 might have on environmentally sensitive areas. And I also know from a fiscal standpoint that I haven't really seen how this pays for itself and how this burden economically is shared. I've asked Chairman Lawler and I've asked Dave Solman, the treasurer of Lake County, to please put cameras in their finance committee meetings so we can watch and understand better the analysis that's gone into this question. They haven't agreed. And so onward we trudge, waiting to get a better understanding of the true fiscal impact of putting this road in place.
Thank you. Candidate Schneider?
Thank you. So how many people here have had to drive on 120 west to east during rush hour or east to west during rush hour? You understand the problem. But the problem is an east-west problem, and Route 53 is a north-south solution. And as Nancy touched on poignantly as well, the funding mechanisms aren't really clear, and the environmental impact is of great concern. I think this is the wrong solution for the problems we face. That doesn't mean we turn our back on the problem. We have to address the problem. The FAST Act was an important step, but as Nancy noted, it was not funded in the most transparent way, I guess would be the nice way to say it. We have to think and rethink transportation in this entire county, using mass transit, buses and rail, so people are moving in off of our roads, building our communities so people can work and play and live without having to rely on driving long distances in oppressive traffic. We have to address it, but I'm concerned that Route 53 is not the right way.
Thank you. Candidate Brad, you'll answer this first. In Flint, Michigan, an emergency manager made final fiscal decisions that later had grave impacts on the community. Is your alliance to the party more important than your alliance to the constituents? Give an example where you stepped up for the citizens.
Thank you. No, I think all 435 representatives are sent to Washington to represent everybody in their district.
In the 10th district, that's about 730,000 people. It doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, you voted for me or against me. I represent everyone in this district. I represent the communities of this district and the interests and priorities and values of this district. I did that when I was in Washington. There were some hard choices. A perfect example I will use is there was a bill passed before I got to Congress called the Bigger Waters Act. It dealt with flood insurance. It was going to increase the cost of flood insurance to many of the people living in this area. We were talking about Fox Lake. It would have devastated many of the homeowners in Fox Lake. Right? Sierra Club was asking us not to vote. Others were asking us, the party was not supporting, but I felt we should not increase at such a quick rate on the families who were living in these homes that would not be able to afford their home and their insurance. We had to do it at a different rate, and I voted to do just that.
Thank you. Candidate Nancy?
Thank you. As a mayor who has put infrastructure at one of the top 3 priorities of my city, this would have never happened. And it's a criminal situation when somebody makes a decision to let down the very people that they've been elected to take care of, to provide public safety and public health for. When the opportunity came before Congress, though, to provide emergency funds to help in this situation, for whatever reason, they chose not to provide those funds. I think that's why it's vitally important to consider having somebody who's been a mayor for 5 years, who has dealt with these decisions day in and day out, to understand the very real impacts that are made in Washington and how they affect people. Our hearts are with the people of Flint. I think it's a bigger question that's going to need to be examined across the country with a number of age pipelines, and it's something that I plan to make a priority.
Thank you, candidates. The next question is going to ask your thoughts, and it's one of those balancing issues of Apple security versus the Federal Bureau of Investigation with privacy concerns. Your thoughts on that? And we'll start with candidate Nancy.
Thank you. What's interesting to me about this question is that the law that's being taken into consideration is over 200 years old. And so while to us it feels acute and fresh and scary and new, it really is something that this country has faced throughout clearly centuries. We need to maintain the security of our nation. Our homeland has to be absolutely protected. That being said, I have very real concerns also about protecting the civil liberties of our residents and making sure that their privacy is protected. So I recognize, to your point, the balance between maintaining security and also maintaining those liberties. When you start to unencrypt things, when you start to create backdoors, there are unintended consequences, and others can hack into security systems. Others can gain access to information that they have no business gaining information from. So it is a difficult one. I, at this point, would like to see us work through other modes to get that information. We know that that data is available in the cloud, and I think that's a good approach for the FBI.
Thank you. Candidate Brad?
This may be where there is a difference. The law of all writs, the 1789 law that is being used to try to persuade Apple to open the phone, doesn't necessarily deal with technology. We need to have a conversation in our country about protecting our civil liberties, which we must, and protecting our security, which we also must. We are a smart nation. There's no reason we can't do both of those things and hold them in balance. I believe Apple has a responsibility to national security. Okay? They're not being asked to create a backdoor to all phones. It's this one specific phone. They're being asked to the data is not available on the cloud. If you have an Apple phone, you have your 4-digit key. After 10 tries, all of that data is wiped out. That's why the government has gone to Apple to say, help us break through on this phone and this phone only and destroy it. What they've done, and this is why it's important that we have the balance, they've gone to the court, a judge has ruled that they can have this information. We have to maintain that balance.
Thank you, Candidate Brad, and you will answer this question next. Switching topics. Do you believe that illegal immigrants should receive legal status, and what are your thoughts on immigration?
Let me take it a step further. If we could pass one piece of legislation tomorrow, it should be comprehensive immigration reform. It is long overdue. I was proud when I was in Congress to introduce that legislation. Had John Boehner brought it to the floor and allowed a vote, I believe that it would have passed overwhelmingly with Democratic and Republican support. Why is it so important? There are 11 million people living in this country today who are living in the shadows. If we pass immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship, with protection of the dreamers, those people will be an increased part of our communities, starting businesses, buying homes, kids going to college, graduating and working in our economy, starting businesses, adding new jobs. The Congressional Budget Office, a nonpartisan organization, estimates that passing immigration reform will add $2 trillion to our economy over the next 2 decades and reduce our debt by $170 billion, allowing us to fund some of the other programs so important to us. So not only do I support immigration reform, but I think it's one of the most important things we can do as a country.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Nancy?
We are a proud nation of immigrants. All of us can think of our grandfathers or great-grandfathers and grandmothers or our own parents who have come here from another country and brought unbelievable gifts that have made us a nation of proud individuals, people who can contribute a whole broad range of great information to moving us forward. I'm a strong supporter of comprehensive immigration reform. There are 11 million people living in the shadows who should be able to feel comfortable coming to school, going to the doctor, being a part of our economy, being welcome in our communities. As a mayor, I created a legal aid clinic in Highland Park, recognizing the needs of my immigrant families who did not feel quite as though they were able to go to the health clinic, the Lake County Health Clinic. So we now provide free legal services to our residents on their path to citizenship. It's vitally important that this is something that's passed by our Congress. Again, enough of the name calling. It's time to move our nation forward, not backwards.
Thank you. The next question is dealing with election contributions. We'll have one more question after this and then move to closing comments. So thank you for your thoughtful questions. There's lots and we're trying to get all the areas covered. So the question is this: how to finance elections with transparency and with the corporations and union contributions? Should we have spending limits on all money spent on campaigns?
As we talked about earlier when we talked about Citizens United, the never-ending drive and requirement to raise ridiculous sums of money really limits the number of people who can run for office. And as a result, we really have a disrepresentative government. We really don't have the voices of the majority being heard because most people cannot move forward. We've seen a small number of women actually in office because of a lack of ability to raise money and so forth. So I would heartily support limits on campaign spending. I think it evens the playing field and it gives us the opportunity to hear from far more people who would be excellent candidates in this realm. In terms of whether it's public money or private money, I believe if it came from one source, everybody would have access to the same resources. Everybody would have the opportunity to spend more time talking to the voters and working with people on the campaign trail and not spending hours on end sitting in an office calling random people for money.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Brad?
Thank you. The last effort at comprehensive campaign finance reform was McCain-Feingold a generation ago. It has been whittled away, and as we have already talked about, Citizens United, that court decision has essentially wiped out any limits on campaign finance. The presidential race is going to cost upwards of $2 billion. It's an extraordinary number. House races are now costing multi-millions, as Nancy talked about. We need to figure out a better way to do this. It's got to come from Congress, the House and the Senate working together, to say we need people's voices back in our elections. A colleague of mine, John Sarbanes, has introduced legislation. Some of the ideas, and I support that, some of the ideas that he talks about there is a matching program that for donations under $100 or $150, government will fund taxpayers by checking off a box on their tax return, can fund that at 6 times the number. So a $100 contribution could generate $600 or $700. That's a step in the right direction. We also have to get away from 2-year campaigns and bring the focus back to governing.
Thank you, candidates. And here's your final question. Candidate Brad, we'll start with you. How would you address the challenges of finding appointment for those over and under 50?
I didn't hear the finding. No, I just didn't hear the word. Finding what?
Finding employment for those over 40 and 50.
This is one of the challenges we've seen in our economy. And people my age, we're 54, our age. When we graduated high school, we were told you're not getting a defined contribution plan or a defined benefit plan, you get a defined contribution plan. Put money into a 401k, put money into a Section 529 to pay for your kid's school, buy a home, take out a mortgage, and everything would work fine. But in 2007, 2008, when our kids were graduating high school and going to college, the market tanked. And people were having to take money out of their 401k, having to take money out of their, couldn't take money out of their home, and then they lost their job, and they're still looking for a job. We need to get our economy growing back again. I'll talk more about this in my closing remarks. We've got to have our economy growing for the middle class, not just the fortunate few. Jobs where the people with skills that made sense a generation ago can learn skills that make sense for the 21st century. Not just young people, but across the age spectrum. Opportunities for people to work and secure the funds necessary for a dignified and secure retirement. That's what I want to work on, and that's what I'll work on when I get back to Congress.
Thank you, candidate. Candidate Nancy?
Thank you. So the question was assisting people over the age of 40 and 50 in finding employment, and so I'll speak to that. Thank you. We know that, I hate to call us seniors, but I guess we could we're almost seniors, middle age, it keeps moving up, bring incredible experience and incredible resources and incredible perspectives that really get lost when we aren't included in the employment force. Part of the challenge is keeping corporations here so that we don't watch jobs go overseas. Part of the challenge also is providing community clearinghouses so that we can bring those who need people together with those who need jobs. And lastly, we have opportunities in our schools. Our schools are suffering right now from a decrease in resources. We were talking earlier about the challenges of not having enough resources in our schools. To be able to bring people in, perhaps at part-time, but nonetheless to give them those opportunities to serve our communities and to serve our students is something that I would strongly support.
Thank you, candidates. Thank you for your thoughtful answers. And a word I learned today is masters instead of seniors. Shows experience, but doesn't tell your age. With that, I would like to invite candidate Brad to make his up to 1 minute closing remark, and please use the podium.
Thank you, Lori. I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this event and this great opportunity to present our thoughts and ideas to you. I'm running for Congress, as I said before, because I want to finish the work I started 4 years ago. I want to work to get our economy growing for all of us, not just that fortunate few. That's why when I was in office, we changed the name from job fairs to hiring fairs, because every employer who came to those had made a promise to us that they would hire at least one person who came and gave them a resume. We had them all around the district, including here in Round Lake. That's why we have to work locally in our communities to help them to get jobs for people who were laid off in those master years, as we're calling it. But I want to make sure that we also are focusing on education, that every child here has the opportunity to get a quality education, regardless of the zip code. I had a chance to speak to 5 of the honor students here and hear about their dreams and ambitions. Every child should be able to pursue their ambitions in this country. They deserve it, but we need it. And that's why I'm running for Congress. I'm running for Congress to continue the work. I look for your support, and I thank you for giving us this time today.
Candidate Nancy?
Thanks again for the chance to talk with you this afternoon. I'm running on a record of advocacy and achievement. We know that the 10th District is full of opportunities and really needs somebody who is able to step forward and take action from day one. We've watched as Bob Dole has nibbled around the edges of very hard-fought fights that we all feel are very, very important to us. So I'm offering you somebody with a background in business and in law who's held elected office now for 7 years, who knows how to be the champion for constituents on matters that are very important to each of us, whether it's healthcare, whether it's education, the environment, jobs, fair wages, you name it. As we travel this district, we see so many opportunities. We haven't had that champion. My name is Nancy Rotering. I'm running for United States Congress. I ask for your support and your vote on March 15th. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, candidates, for your willingness to serve. Good luck with your races. And thank you, audience, for being here and for your thoughtful questions today. At this time, we will recess for approximately 5 minutes. And I'd like to invite you back to listen to the discussions we're going to have.